mean, first off, thanks Dan and everyone else at SALT for the invite here. I'm gonna do kind of a 50-50 half slideshow, half like a live demo. So we'll dig into the slideshow. I hope everyone's doing well. Let's go next. I guess we just click it. Cool. So yeah, who am I? I am Senior Web Strategy Manager at Netlify. Put some other places I've been here on the right. Prior to this, I was with Auth0 and then Onyx. I have my own agency and some other side projects. I've been working on the web for over a decade here. Yeah, and I do consulting with others in primarily like the developer tools space, like Puppet, DevOps, and other SaaS platforms. But it's kind of funny. I heard this term recently. It's hard to place this hybrid skill set in a box, but I heard specializing generalist as a term, which I think I'm going to start adopting more. So yeah, and if you're unfamiliar with the JAMStack static sites, what that is, I'll just kind of brief through a little overview here, some of the benefits, and of course, obviously, we'll go into that demo and showcase deploying the static site within minutes to Netlify. Some advantages of going static and utilizing the JAMStack, which the term JAMStack, we'll get into that as well. But speed and performance is top. I mean, instead of, you're moving away from your dynamic, traditional, typically bloated website solutions and just serving straight HTML. It's lightweight, it's fast, it's more secure. There's a lot less surface area, so it's less susceptible to attacks. And the scale and maintainability of it, both from scale in terms of handling traffic spikes, etc., as well as maintainability with developer workflow and experience with CI and CD is just, it's really unmatched. Legacy web stack may look something like this, where it's pretty complex to essentially get the site up to the browser with infrastructure and server management, databases, load balancers, CDN mixed in. Whereas the JAMStack is really just this decoupled approach where ADN is a term we use at Netlify for application delivery network. And yeah, I mean, serverless, you may hear the term in the JAMStack world of serverless. And of course there is servers. It's just, it offloads this infrastructure management into a platform as a service offering like we have. So getting sites up is super fast. And again, that security aspect of you're just using a CDN or ADN in between the other functionality and pushing it up to the browser. Some more on the benefits. Again, speed, developer experience. Yeah. And just kind of moving right along into that, the demo side of things, I've put together a practical resource on GitHub that anyone interested can grab, and we'll get to that in a bit. If you just hit my domain, scottmathson.com/VirtuaCon, that will redirect to that GitHub repo. Yeah, let's look a little further. So some more JAMStack building blocks, and what we're going to focus on today is strictly one piece here of Jekyll. But essentially, you can utilize headless CMSs, and in place, a microsite that we manage at Netlify, headlesscms.org, is a good resource to check out if you're not familiar with implementing those. We do also have Netlify CMS, which is open source on GitHub. But in my past, I've used Contentful at Auth0. It was quite a large marketing team, over 100 folks. And so product marketing and folks that weren't, quite as familiar with utilizing text editors, coding, etc. We spun up a really awesome instance of Contentful that was fully optimized and bunch of different meta tags and fields, which we'll get into here in a bit. I'll showcase some of what we can see on the front end. Yeah, so whether or not you use a headless CMS, whether or not you bake in functionality of using APIs like Stripe for payment management or other popular ones is essentially up to you. When utilizing the JAMStack, the opportunities are honestly quite endless. You can also pull in like frameworks like Angular, Vue, React, SPA's single page app frameworks and things of that nature. And they're all going to go into the static site generator of your choice. Again, I'm quite, I don't know, just maybe it's familiarity, but kind of biased towards Jekyll. I really do like using Jekyll. At Netlify, we're using Hugo. But a bit of a teaser is we're exploring some things on Vue, and given that the creator of 11D just joined the marketing team, we're spinning up some cool things there to come. But yeah, after the SSG does its work, you can host at a place like Netlify or CloudFlare, GitHub pages, quite a few different options. I'll try to be fairly agnostic within this, not trying to give a sales pitch. The only sales pitch I try to give is that you really should be using the JAMStack in static sites. Let's see if I can go next. Whoops. So let's dig into what I've created, which again, you can just hit scottmathson.com/VirtuaCon if you want to look kind of live in tandem here. This is the repository. And again, it's a Jekyll site. I'm going to pull it up locally here and kind of show a few things from it. I do have the README, which goes through if you want to install, and then if you want to deploy for yourself, some different steps, which of course is in Markdown. You look over here and it's a little prettier. Things like a deploy to Netlify button. Yeah, so I'm going to start Jekyll served by serving this locally so we can look at a few things and what this boilerplate does. Make sure we're rolling. Yep. And again, these instructions, if you're not familiar with Bundler, Jekyll or any of this is included in the README. And I will note this too as well, that for those folks maybe not doing web development, etc., this deploy to Netlify option here is quite quick. You do need a GitHub account or GitLab or Bitbucket. Yeah, and it's really a fast couple minute setup to get going, and you can get you can utilize your own domain, or you can just mess around with this template that I'm providing and get a .netlify.app kind of staging domain. But let's dig into what we put together in this template, boilerplate. So this is the config file. It's in YAML of a Jekyll site. And we're declaring some things at the top. Just kind of these like site title, description, etc. Some publisher pieces, which will map to schema that I'll show you in a second. So if you do utilize this, and especially if you're going to utilize something like this in production, be sure to replace these items, example.com, etc. And again, in this checklist, I put that in there because, yeah, we don't want to have you shipping something to production where it's actually broken. But so use this at your leisure. Just make sure that you go through this config at the very least, update to your information, your Google tracking, UA tracking ID, as well as a couple of spots here if you choose to use Google Tag Manager and here, so that you actually put your container ID in there. But pulling this up, there's not much to, I didn't put too much content on this, but let's see how this maps out. So this is the index HTML page we're looking at over here. And it has front matter. This is common, and this is essentially how a Jekyll page comes together is you declare a layout, you have title, and then I'll go into this concept that I do here that we've done at scale at Auth0, implementing this across Netlify now, which is there is a title which maybe you'll show on the front end, but then there's this meta title field which will show and map to the head files. And then similarly with description, there's the option for meta description you can include. And if you make a modification, I'm not going to do anything now, but May 15th, you can update this so that this will then map to the sitemap, set a priority, etc. Again, looking at, and here's some classes that you may not be familiar with. I'm using tachyons for a CSS framework. Of course, there's not a whole lot of styling to this, but I pulled in normalize and then tachyons. And these are just some unique classes to that. NW9, for example, is minimum width 9, and it sets, just different things of that nature. So going beyond this index, well, actually staying on the index for a minute, let's dig in. So we have title, meta title, description. So I'm going to look at the source code for this here. And let's see where these map out. So the titles are the same at this current moment, but we're doing this locally, so I can make an update here. Let's just randomly put this. We're not optimizing for a real production site. But you'll see that in this update, in this save, what the page layout looks like going into that is it essentially, it's again, static JAMStack sites just spit out HTML templates. So this include variable, which this syntax is called liquid. That was created by Shopify, maintained by them, and Jekyll pulls liquid into it. So we include the head file before the body. So let's look at the head. Let's see what we have going on here. These are the if statements. Liquid, again, I would explore that and you can see what possibilities you have. But what I do as a fallback is, of course, I don't want to just put, page title, because if there is a meta title, we want to show that first. If there's not, we'll show the page title. If somebody totally forgot to set a title altogether, then we'll default to that site title right there. And then I do hyphenate site title at the end of this, unless the site title is within the page title. And these site variables, the page variables are quite obvious. This being the index page, so page.title, page.metatitle. The site variables come from the config, so site.title, site.description. Sorry, Zoom's getting in my way. Let me pull this up. There we go. The little Zoom screen sharing bar. Yeah, so you can see digging into that. That's how that title is set. Now we saved -VirtuaCon here. So that's updated there. And it maps to going throughout. I similarly check on Open Graph and Twitter and other metadata that if the page includes a meta title, let's show that first. If it doesn't, show the title, etc. Same with description, meta description, as well as. And so this template really is a search-focused, search-optimized template that you could start and utilize for a simple portfolio site, or fully customize and make, into something really unique, your own blog, or as we'll look to in a second, this is a good boilerplate or kind of skeleton for even a company blog like we had at Auth0, which was Jekyll. But within the head, on the page, so head comes from the page layout, post, which we'll get to in a second, and I have something commented out I wanted to show live, has a bit different of a head. The only difference in this file is that we pull in blog posting versus just the web page schema. But going back to this, and we're kind of getting towards the end of the structure, and I'll dig into a bit more. So we include this file, which essentially does the same thing, where with that liquid templating again, look for a meta title, or else show a page title, look for a description, or else or meta description, or else show a description, on and on. Publisher comes from that config file, the site variables, publisher name, bouncing back again, another reason to update with your relevant info. I just put my agency name in there. So then that maps out to the front here. No need to give it a refresh. I don't know why I did that, just have it. We have, let's look. So we have the meta title from index showcasing there. We have it as well in the open graph and Twitter. In the head file, I could, it could be said to, if you download this, you could rip this site title out because that's just duplicating there at this point. But what I wanted to showcase was this JSON implementation of schema.org. So for the web page schema, what we looked at that's included, again, this is all automated in the sense that it's not a per page schema you're setting. It's just that, hey, if the page is set up and you have things within the front matter like title, meta title, you have things in the config like publisher, this is what we're going to show. So we'll go to the blog page. Same goes here. You can see similar metadata there. Looking at the blog template. Again, very basic pages. I didn't spend a lot of time putting a bunch of content on here, just solely for the fact that this, is just a skeleton boilerplate to roll with. But yeah, we can see that again, it found the title from this page, the meta title rather, and it's prioritized to show this before this. So yeah, at that point, we then have web page schema, looking at the blog, which is a bit different. The post layout. What I wanted to show you here was just instead of doing the console here, I'm going to just clear this out. I'm going to save that or uncomment that and save it. So now I'm going to display the schema that is displayed in this head post file. I'll go up to that to show you. Again, similar setup here. Down to the schema include its blog posting.html from up here. Go back to post. So then if I refresh now at the bottom, it's just going to display what what could be happening here. Oh, so given that it's a script tag, it doesn't like that, of course. It's not going to display that. So let me make a quick edit on this, and then we can see what that looks like. Again, I'm going to undo those changes, but there it is, right? Okay, so now on a blog post, for example, in the post structure in Jekyll, we'll check that out in a second, but this Hello World blog post I put together yesterday, it's just lorem ipsum, so let me clear out of this Google Translate prompt. But it's sourcing the main entity of page, web page URL, ID rather, and the page URL. And we dig into blog posting schema type and the headline, description, URL, image, some other things here throughout. So date modified, this is sourced from, and versus date published, sourced from, digging into the post front matter, which is a little more robust than the regular index and blog HTML pages front matter. And so primarily what it's doing here is I set this to be today versus yesterday when I was putting this together, just to showcase and utilize that the date modified will go off of this, as well as within the sitemap. We can look at that quickly. The sitemap showcases this timestamp here. Yeah, and going back to that, rounding that off, I can clear out of this. Like I said, that was the whole point of printing that out on this page. So this is the schema markup for the blog posting. And let me just undo a couple of those changes quickly while we're here. We'll just rip that out altogether. Do not need that. Yeah, so a basic Jekyll site here with the homepage, index, blog, some navigation that will automatically, if we created a new page, the way I set up the nav is that for every page in the site page, unless you have this navigation exclude field, which I did so on index solely for the fact that it would have duplicated this homepage hard-coded declaration I did up here. So if you do not want something to show and you're utilizing this template, just similarly to the sitemap exclude, like is done in the 404 template, sitemap exclude yes, navigation exclude yes, add those fields and it won't show it up here. And yeah, honestly, if there's any questions regarding utilizing this template altogether, I tried to lay out some resources, so it should be fairly robust and fairly straightforward as to how to get going, what to do. But if there's any specific questions, definitely reach out to me. I wanted to showcase just very quickly how on the Netlify front, we can get this going. Again, that Zoom deal is in the way. So I'd done this earlier, and so let me actually quickly delete this site and we'll give it another shot. And for what it's worth, kind of the separation of church and state, if you will, the separation of what we're showing within the metadata, the title, the open graph, etc., versus what we show here. Say here, which is the blog reference. I know I didn't go over this just for the sake of time, briefly look at it. On the /blog page, we're looking, so if you add another post in within posts here, we're looking at for each post within the site, we're going to display that in this kind of reverse chronological list. And we'll show the image that's set for that, the title, not the meta title. And so I'll get to this in 1 second, kind of this in practice on a live production site. But let's go ahead and deploy to Netlify. So what I did, again, you've got this simple deploy to Netlify button here you could roll with. But what I'm doing is hopping into my account and I went new site from Git and I found the repository here. And we're going to deploy master branch, which here we are. It's just the one branch I've just been committing to there for this demo. And Jekyll build, yep, looks good. So we'll deploy and you'll see really within a short amount of time while this is building, I'm going to show a different place you could deploy to. But within a short amount of time, this is going to log out and it's going to spit out, this is the random subdomain it gave us for this site, which we could go here. If you choose to go this method, you can change the site name. You could add different domains and utilize external DNS provider or Netlify DNS. Yeah, but let's look at this actually before going over to the other deployment option. So we'll let this roll through what it's doing. I didn't pull many plugins or gems into this boilerplate. We do have Jekyll paginate in the case that you want to, you start publishing, utilizing this, and you can have like a next page on that blog feed index. You could look into that while this is building actually. And so what that is doing is all the dependencies of Jekyll shown here. It's just, yeah, essentially going through those. But let's look at the sitemap actually briefly. There's Jekyll plugin or Jekyll sitemap plugins, but I find it just as easy to hand code my own. And again, it's included here in this resource, but yeah, it's going through the different site pages, and unless it has that sitemap exclude front matter that we saw on the 404 page, for example, and unless some other checks and variables are or aren't met, then we'll show. And if the page has a priority, we'll show that, or default to 0.7, which again, I know priority isn't necessarily required within a sitemap, but just try to get things as optimized as possible here. Robots, this is again a place where you'll want to update as I display and write in the README, update to your own domain. So we should be good. Here is the deploy. And so now we have staging link. We're going to get an error in the console. I'll look at that solely for the fact that Google Tag Manager, since I put my container ID as something kind of, the container ID doesn't exist, then we're going to throw that error here. But yeah, this is now deployed to a staging link where we could mess around with it, or you could optimize and go live with it. And I know I've been showing a lot on the text editor, the coding front. I'm going to stop this this local instance here. But within GitHub natively here, you could add posts. Well, again, headlesscms.org. So if you're setting up projects for a larger organization and you want to utilize a CMS or things of that nature, you could easily extend static sites to do so. Or honestly, githubs.com, their product, their graphical user interface here, whatever you may want to call it, you can do a lot. I mean, I could create new files, new blog posts, new pages. I could duplicate that page. So you could honestly, and then run them through pull requests. There's even this project board, which is similar to Trello, a lot that natively, even if you don't code, you can do right within GitHub and push a site live. And every time you commit to master, so the ideal scenario, obviously you want to have a couple branches for staging, etc., or some type of CI/CD continuous integration and delivery process, to where, like at Netlify, when somebody opens a pull request for a blog post, it cannot be merged into master until there's at least one approving review, etc. And that's all managed through Netlify settings. You can really do a robust workflow for collaborating with teammates. So I wanted to show, like I said, agnostic setup. So I'm actually going to revert this change later, but I will do quickly deploy this to a subdomain atop my live production domain here. So this is with CloudFlare. I utilize Netlify, of course, for like my agency site and some other sites, but I have not migrated my personal site to that yet. So I'm going to save this CNAME record, and then I'll show you how with Cloudflare, which you can set up a free account here as well, how you can get going with that. So look into Cloudflare and GitHub pages. These are the different records for GitHub pages, and I won't scroll any further beyond that for sake of not revealing any API keys or things of that nature. A new file I'm going to add here is just all caps CNAME. And let's make sure that's all spelled out right. Yep, correct. What change did I make here? Yeah, I made this. Let's undo that. And I could commit this change with the terminal here, but again, I want to showcase another GitHub product that, for folks that maybe aren't familiar with version control or Git, this is called GitHub Desktop Application. And when you make changes locally, if you do choose to pull this down, and I just right-clicked and I added the new file for CNAME, for example, then it's going to track in here. So I will commit this directly to master. Again, this is just my project repo. We don't need to have staging in different environments set up. So we'll go there, go back here, check things out. And this CNAME should be, there's the new CNAME file. And then within GitHub settings, we'll utilize what's called GitHub pages and use master as the source of truth. And just one sec, it should read the CNAME. Let me utilize it this way, set it up this way. Well, here we go. Okay. It's weird that it's displaying it atop their .github.io. This is a different pages implementation than usually when you commit a CNAME and then set up GitHub pages. But alas, it is live. One change I want to do here, and then we'll look at, well, no, for the sake of time, I won't do that. But if this were you utilizing this, you'd go through and you'd update these various things with taking example.com out and utilizing that. But just to briefly look at, and let me pull up the Zoom actually to double check that, Dan, I believe we're good on time. I forget exactly what time we started, but just ping me if we're going over. So Auth0, where I was prior to Netlify, this is just an example of a Jekyll subdomain. Their blog is utilizing Jekyll, and it's at scale. It's getting tons of traffic, and yeah, like monthly uniques in the millions. We went through a redesign about a year and a half ago now. Within the blog, we utilized the meta title and title separation that I showcased earlier. Really an optimized blog and doing quite well. So this would be pulling in title, this would be description, whereas maybe on the blog itself and the metadata, the title would be something longer and more optimized for search. Pro tip on a tool, ctr.tools is amazing for writing click-through optimized title and descriptions. I've utilized that quite a few times. And so, yeah, I mean, we grew this blog from that, the different strategies I was showcasing of separating meta title and title and description and meta description. But as well, we localized and, made sure everything was semantic and good to go in way of, this is a Japanese translated blog post. We have the self-referencing hreflang there. The sitemap, if you dug into that, has XHTML link element pointing to the various versions and translations of that. And similarly, the homepage and marketing, kind of core marketing pages have some localized content there. And briefly looking at the schema implemented for that was, again, just basic web page organization. I will say that after implementing this was one of the first tasks. I came in and I said, oh, there's no schema markup. Let's dig in. Let's get that going before really diving deep into the blog, as well as this fun little catalog here, multiple thousand pages. That's kind of a combo of React, Next.js, and some other frameworks. But one of the first pieces was to implement schema. And after doing so, since Auth0 does not have a Wikipedia page profile yet, it got us into this knowledge panel, knowledge graph. You can see just by looking at the title displayed on page and within the blog index feed, if you went there, we do that separation as well. in Netlify. It was one of the first things I did joining. I'm going through and, per post, just optimizing and kind of putting those, like how to migrate or these different relevant keywords or action verbiage to entice and try to get higher click-throughs. And then at the top, I did reference Plink, which is a side project of mine. And this guy isn't quite on the static site generation front. I've essentially done that at scale on my own to where it could be considered the JAMStack model. Absolutely, it's utilizing CloudFlare workers. So on the server side, within milliseconds, as you see this loaded within a second, this is John and Martin, who spoke earlier, their new podcast that they're bringing to market. But server side, this is checking various APIs and then spitting out just a basic HTML response that I'm sure if you went through here, there's no schema. There's some other pieces that, it being a side project of mine could be optimized, but just to showcase the speed factor of something like that. And then if you go to a different page where, again, that was all the request happened server side. So within milliseconds, it sourced all the relevant links for this exact show in Google, etc. And pretty quick response times.